Thanks for joining us for this episode of Coffee with Closers, where business leaders share insights on how to build businesses from the ground up and best practices for innovating in their industry.
Hey Chris, thanks for joining me.
Sure, thanks for having me, Samuel.
Tell us, our audience, a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, so I'm Chris, and I'm the co-founder of Sketchflow, which is a creative collaboration tool for designers and teams.
Perfect. So prior to starting this tech company, you're in the early startup mode of that organization. You had some corporate world experience. Share a little bit about that.
I was strategy consultant and strategy manager at IBM and Walmart, advising Fortune 500 companies with their digital transformation initiatives, and for Walmart, within their real estate strategy.
Digital transformation is a big buzzword I hear a lot. So define to our audience, what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so for Fortune 500 companies, oftentimes, their operations are not integrated well with digital, and they also want to explore what digital can bring more revenue and more profits into their businesses. And IBM works with them to create strategies and trembles water with them to find about what can they use in terms of digital to make their business more sustainable and stimulate more growth.
Makes sense. And digital is also such a broad term that people use. So like what falls into some of those digital when you talk about what are some of the components that fall into that?
Right. So for example, if you're working with a Fortune 500 financial services client, then their interest is how do you utilize mobile to create better experience for their customers. Not necessarily just about creating a mobile app per se, but it's about how to integrate their pre-existing products, like maybe lending or maybe underwriting insurance or anything like that.
So basically they're using mobile platforms. So you were kind of saying if they're mobile users, how do you make their experience better?
Right. So just creating more fun experiences for mobile savvy customers, right? It's not just about commodity products like lending and commercial banking and so forth.
Yeah, and then also getting better data on the actual usability and also how the adoption of the product or service that they're using. There's a lot that goes into that. Yeah, and also, I think, for me, like sometimes the technology is available, but enterprises are really maximizing for what it's useful for. And I can tell you a simple experience that I enjoy a lot. I fly American a lot, and occasionally I have to call in because I book a ticket and I see my pre-check isn't added to my reservation, so I have to call in to add the pre-check, right? So as soon as I call, they greet me by saying, "Samuel, are you calling about your upcoming travel?" They'll give me the reservation information, and I say yes, and then say, "Are you trying to make a reservation change, or you want to make an additional reservation, new reservations?" I'll say make a change. Immediately they greeted me by my name, they connected me right to the reservation person. They quickly add my pre-check, and then I'm able to go on with my life. They didn't ask me for my birthday. They didn't ask me for my social security information. They were able to verify me with, I think they know my voice as well as I think they are verifying me with my phone number as well. And I've seen some of the credit card companies are starting to use where when you call in, they say, "Do you give us permission to use your voice to verify who you are in the future?" I've seen that with some credit card companies as well. So I think that's probably a digital transformation overall from a user experience.
Digital transformation is just a large enterprise transformation, right? Each individual component that makes up to that digital transformation is essentially what businesses have to look for in the upcoming years to be able to be sustainable.
Exactly, and I think sometimes these big enterprises buy so many subdivisions that are, other companies that are third-party products, they buy and put it part of their ecosystem of product offering, but they're not connected. So for example, like I can call Comcast Homes. I have Comcast Xfinity for my home as the internet. I also have the Comcast Home, which is their home security system. Completely disconnected infrastructure. So when I call, I have to reintroduce myself, even if I call about the same product, same company, same offerings, but the two different companies don't talk to each other. So they're completely disconnected. Then I feel so frustrated. I explain all this, so they're like, "Oh, you got to call the Comcast Home." And now I got to go through that entire exercise again. So
those are definitely the very problem for IBM or any other consulting firms that advise on digital transformation. Those are the very problems that they're trying to solve.
Yeah, and also I'm calling from my Wi-Fi that's connected to your network. You already know where I'm calling from. Then why do I have to verify myself like 5 times? All in the name of security and privacy and all that. I understand that, but there's also systems and technology available to verify who's calling in, where they're calling from, things of that nature. So I think it's a great thing that organizations are actually making that a priority. That's awesome. So obviously you left the corporate world. Now you're on your own venture.
Yes.
Starting a tech company, going into extremely saturated market, right? I mean, there's companies that are going public in that same space, in the collaboration and project management space. So why another software in that space?
So when you think of starting a new venture, you can always either talk about formulating strategies on top-down perspective and bottoms-up perspective. And I would argue that if you are figuring out how to create a company with top-down thinking, you will most likely fail. Because when you think of project management, which is our space, as you said, it's just highly competitive market. There are so many collaboration tool providers, the big names too, Slack, Asana, Trello, Basecamp. If you think about top-down, you'll never be able to enter this market, right? You have to think of bottoms up, where you have to focus on what the customers are saying, what the users are perceiving when they use pre-existing tools. When we approached our target customers, which is creative professionals and designers, they were still using email as their primitive tool. And the reason that they were using email was that their coworkers, their stakeholders, weren't on that tool that they wanted to use, like Asana and Trello. Email was pretty much the lowest common denominator for most of these people, and they just had to use it. It's not their choice. It's just, it was forced in the market. Needless to say, email is never enough for creative collaboration, right? When we approached them and what they felt about email, they were really eager to, just spit out their pain points, right? They were really excited about how we can solve by creating a new set of collaboration tool that only creative professionals will be able to use efficiently. So when we thought about that bottoms-up approach, and we approached to our customers, we were excited that we were able to validate that these customers are still looking for a new project management, even though they had a lot of different alternative options.
Makes sense. Yeah. So you're going into a space extremely competitive, like you said, and then you found an area of gap that you're going to hone in on, where you saw that this is still a pain. Right. With regards to, with all the products available already, they still can solve some of those core problems. So you figured out a niche market, space, yes. And then that's where you're focusing on, which means. So I think, if any entrepreneur, whether it be a tech startup or any other sort of a business, what are some of the key principles they should be thinking in mind, right, especially when they're trying to saturate or get into a space where they already see mega players are in there?
It's always it's always the customer. What is the customer saying? And 90% of insights that you'll be able to use for building your own startup should be coming from their customer's voice, not yourself, right? Founders these days, entrepreneurs these days, often make mistakes. Like I made this mistake, but like you make something that you like to use and you like to have fun with, and that's not a business. It's just a hobby, right? To make a business, you have to really listen to what the customers are saying, and I think that's the most important principle that you have to just abide by. And second of all is when you're approaching a new market, like we did, just always think about what are some of the gaps, right? Like you said, what are some of the gaps in the market that aren't being filled today? If you think, for example, like Zoom, the web conference tool, when Zoom launched, WebEx existed, Skype was there, and people were pretty much satisfied with how they used WebEx and Skype, right? Zoom wasn't a new innovation technology tool per se, right? It was just a simply better web conferencing tool, and people were excited about it. It was a product that just worked versus Skype and WebEx, not so much. And that's another principle that I always think about. Are we creating a product that actually works, and are the customers actually feeling happy about using this tool?
Yeah, most certainly. And I think if you look at some of the big players, you mentioned Basecamp as well, they kind of stuck to their core. There's been a lot of great ideas people throw at them and say, I would like to see this, or I would like that feature, but they just don't go create any feature that anybody else recommends. They just know that what their core product is, and they stick to that. So I think sometimes the biggest problem that entrepreneurs have is when they get these customer feedback, and they just create a feature bloated technology that almost 80% of the features nobody uses, and then there's like only 20% of the core product that there's actually any use for, right? Instead of making that 20% super good and extremely efficient and working well, they just spend money on resource on things that may or may not be used by 100% of the user base.
Right.
So I think some of the lessons you're learning then basically is that you got to find the gap in the marketplace and create a product and create a product for the customer as opposed to what the founders or the core team wants, which is important. Now, especially when you're starting a company and you have no prior history of how this actually turns out, right? No prior history of what it's going to cost in terms of selling, what the market is willing to bear, in terms of the price, or how much is it even going to cost you to acquire a customer. So, what are some of the things that you've been thinking through as a starting, as founding members, in terms of the customer acquisition cost, or what is going to be required to continue to reinvest into the product as well as to reinvest into technology to grow? From a sales side, like what are some of the things and thoughts that are going through your mind?
One big assumption that we're trying to validate, and we're partially validated in this, but is that companies are shifting towards more design-led culture. Designers, they haven't been able to push a lot of voice when it comes to adopting new tools or making impact in business prior to companies like Airbnb, which the founders were designers. And that shift is really triggering a lot of good tools that facilitate that design-led business, especially in Silicon Valley companies, right? That's a validation that we're trying to, or that's an assumption that we're trying to validate. And within that, companies are more willing to spend money on design tools than ever before. Design has been an important part of their business now. As before, it was more about engineering, marketing, and sales, and so forth. Design was always the least prioritized segment of business. Needless to say, millennials are all about visual, and design can create that value to companies, right? So, needless to say, companies are looking to expand and proliferate design offerings and design efforts. And that creates enough of an opportunity for us to tremble in this market. As far as is this a sustainable operation when it comes to sales and marketing, I think it's a bit early to validate on that because I think the priority is to build a good product that people want to share and people want to use. That was our priority from day one, and it still is right now. But as soon as we hit that product market fit, I think that's when you start to think about how to scale, how to accelerate for growth.
Yeah. So when you think about tech companies, right? There's a couple of things that they do well. Like they hire a growth hacker that knows some tweaks that you can make in the product to make it more viral or have easy way of increasing adoption, or they go hire a bunch of salespeople and do some cold outreach and get in front of as many prospects as possible, or they invest into some marketing initiatives to grow. I mean, you can't just have one of anything. You got to have all of those. So what are some of the strategies and tactics that you have in place or are planning to have in place to accelerate the growth and kind of reach some milestones that you might have?
Yeah. When you're a startup, right, you can't do everything. You have to focus on one thing that creates 80% of the value. When we thought about how to go to the market, we instantly thought of content because designers are always looking for better ways to improve their workflow, improve their productivity. And I think that's an opportunity for us to just proliferate in that content marketing business versus like just spending money on Salesforce and so forth. I think content drives a lot of branding. It drives a lot of reasons to click into our website versus just a random ad. I'm not sure if designers are really into that. Content is something that they are actively looking for, not passively. So we want to keep investing in that versus spending marketing budget and other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, content is a long game. It's not a quick win, right? And you have to be completely invested into just keep going at it, even when you may not see an immediate return at all.
Right.
And also, I think I've seen content marketing working extremely effective when you're selling a product where the price is structured in a way that if you were to actually, and I mean, almost it has to be like a self-service product, right? So where you have either a trial product where they can go and test it for themselves, and then they naturally adapt it and they're willing to pay for it for the additional feature set that they may get from, right?
Yes.
But if you were to introduce a sales person to that equation, then it increases the cost of acquisition.
Right.
Now you can justify the price that your market is willing to bear because you can't afford to pay for the sales rep plus the actual cost of operating the software, right?
Yes.
So I think content marketing is extremely effective, but as long as the business leaders understands that it's an investment and it's not going to play immediate return, but you got to be committed to playing that game for a very, very long time.
Yeah. Yes. And if you think about how sales, it's about creating a demo, doing one-on-one meetings, maybe web conferencing first, and then flying out to visit their company, their office, and sitting down with them, negotiating, that all long process of closing a deal, right? There are products that work in that space, like ERP, CRM tools, like large enterprise scale tools that companies are interested in. For us, it's more of small to medium sized agencies and creative teams and startups are looking to invest in ways to improve their creative workflow. And so that in that perspective, we just think that it's better to invest in content because content drives interest, content drives brand, content drives a lot of web traffic that happens to be very organic. Obviously, you could do paid marketing to boost content, but there are other ways to boost content in terms of organic ways. So
most certainly, and I think, especially like you said, I mean, if you know your customers are extremely prone to read a lot, to make them more creative or be more efficient in what they do or improve the processes that they're doing, right? Create content that helps them, then they will trust the brand, right? Now they see you as a trusted advisor. When you have a product offering, they're much more likely to adapt that product because they know, hey, the company's behind this information, they know my pain and they understand my marketplace. And when they make a recommendation or when they create a product, it has to be somewhat useful for my use case.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's extremely smart move on your part. I mean, I can sit here and talk about some of the other startup issues, but obviously being a co-founder in a tech space, you come from a corporate world, IBM, Walmart, you have thousands of employees, you had probably 100 people working on the same project, indefinite timeline, millions of dollars in resources. To go to a startup, now you got to be extremely vigilant in how you use your time and resources.
Yes.
So productivity is extremely important, how you efficiently operate. Now you might be playing the CEO role one day, you have also the product engineer role, you have the sales and marketing role, and you have all kinds of roles, right? And you're also marketing yourself and the company by showing up on somewhere like this, right? And to being on an interview.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about some of your productivity hacks and what are some of the tips and tricks that you have to keep you more proficient and efficient.
Yeah. When there are thousands of things just throwing at you, you have to be really deliberate about what battles you pick and choose prior to the other battles that they're coming at you, right? I like to divide my week, so 7 days, into 14 different blocks of time, right? So mornings and afternoons for 7 days. And within that 14 time blocks, I allocate different stuff, different priorities before the week starts. Like for example, today, like for mornings I have this, and then I have another meeting with a customer, right? In the afternoon, I'm spending that time to just write a blog content, right? I'm allocating different priorities so that I have enough of a time to focus on, right? If I don't plan into blocks, then I would just continue replying to emails, continue just posting content, continue talking to my engineers. It's just not structured, so to speak.
So basically focused work.
Focused work, yes. Our core value is, one of our core values at our company is we depend on systems to achieve flow. Flow is a psychology word that speaks to deep work, so focused work. When you achieve flow, then you are no longer mindful about the time that goes. You're just really just hard focused on the work that you're doing, and it's just you're achieving to a degree where you're just not thinking of anything else but that work. And like if you think about like how maybe you had an opportunity where you worked on a deck or maybe a proposal, and you just, when you look at the time and you just, 5 hours just went by, right? That's flow, and we depend on systems to achieve that. And I think that 14 block really speaks to that system, making a system for myself. And the other hack that I do is whenever I have like a long list of to-do lists, I try to group them. I try to group them in multiple blocks. Think of like, what are some of the ways that I can just knock all these 2-3 things to do in one stone, right? And that allows myself to reduce the level of the length of the to-do list and just knock things out at a time. Yeah.
Makes sense. So is that the Pomodoro Technique that I've heard about? Is that?
I'm not sure if there's any.
Yeah, so I think Pomodoro Technique is one that I heard where you have you basically block out time and say these are 15-minute increments that you block out 15-minute increments. And you take like a 2-minute break to get your minds off of something and go into another 15-minute focused work. The other idea I think you're sharing is like the batching of the same type of tasks,
right.
So you're not being constantly pulled in so many different directions. So you have a creative job, which is something that requires your minds, and then you have like just a mundane task, which might be sending emails. But then block those emails into maybe a half an hour or an hour block. Then your creative thinking is to your most productive time of the day. Maybe it could be the mornings or. Right. Depending on the personality, right? Like maybe they're better, more creative, maybe end of the day or whatever that might be, right? Yeah. So I think that's the concept I'm hearing. But going back to like, almost this thought just came to my mind because I know as creative people, especially we're all, we're in the service business. We're always interacting with our customers, and then they expect instant responses. And email is one of those instant response, thing where you are expecting response from people, and that's also a big interruption. So you're creating a product that's eliminating that email challenge that the creative people have. What are some of the hacks that people should have in terms of balancing the customer service aspect of it? I have to respond to my client and keep them informed on what's going on, but also I have to be focused on getting quality work done. So I'm not in the mode of responding back as the email comes in. What are some of the things that, whether you with the software that you're building or from your own experience, what are some of the things that you think creative people in general should be doing?
Yeah, so if you're in a job where you have to constantly be responsive to your customers, it's definitely a challenge. And one of the ways I deal with these issue is I try to work as a team, work on this as a team, right? I'm not the only one who's competent and enough to interact with customers directly, right? My engineers, my other co-founders, they are all competent and know enough of a business, know enough of our product to be able to be really responsive and to the customers, right? And not only this creates enough of time for me to focus on other things, it also creates a company-wide culture of dedicating themselves to customers. Right? If one member of your team is just dealing with customers and the rest of them aren't, it's really hard to create that atmosphere of customer-driven thinking and customer-driven culture. So we try to just have everyone be responsive and allocate times. And when it's their time to be responsive to their customers, then they are all about being immediate responsive. Taking immediate actions and being responsive to customers.
This is actually our problem. Like some of our account managers have this challenge that I'm referring to. They want to respond back so fast, but I'm also trying to get them to think that instead of replying, you got to batch your replies. Also, our customers are just like, they have like 5 emails in one day, like 7 emails. Make sure it doesn't go online. But the thing is, if you reply, then they have another question. When you reply, they have another question. But if you do it like at 2 to 3 o'clock, I'm going to take all their replies, combine like 3 of their emails, put it into one response, send it to them. They're seeing it at the end of the day, they don't have time to respond back. Yes. It actually eliminates a lot of back and forth and also answers all of the questions in one. The other thing, we've kind of implemented the ability for multiple people to reply, but it also creates, a thing like, I thought Maria was going to reply. I thought Michelle was going to reply. So there's no who is responsible problem. Right. So then now, nobody's responsible, right? That's also a challenge when you have a team that's working on certain things. So obviously, there's time blocking. You've been explained, and you can have a team effort in terms of responding back. But what more can we do to make sure the creativity you don't kill the creativity in the interest of customer service and being prompt and responsive to customers? What else can you be doing as a creative team?
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, we are systems thinkers. And meaning you have to be really systematic about doing the tasks that you're assigned to do. If you think about emails, there are certain types of emails that one person can do better than the other, right? So before we go to our customers, we think about who can answer this better than the others, right? So for me, it's about just general customer general inquiries, and for engineering support, and our CTO or head of engineering would be able to answer this much better than the others, right? So creating that systemic process beforehand creates a lot of better process and just better systematic way of approaching these things.
Makes sense, yeah. And also, if you use a tool, like maybe I don't know exactly what your tool can do, but there are email support tools you can assign. Assign a ticket to a certain person who can address that question better. So it's not in somebody's inbox and nobody knows who to reply, who's supposed to take the lead on that.
Right.
Yeah, I think we're also a creative agency, so we have a lot of customers. We're very customer centric. We're very concerned about the responsiveness, but also it comes at a price when you're having to do very focused work or the deep work, right? It can be an interruption, or even just kind of kill your creativity sometimes because you're switching between so many different types of tasks, right?
It's really good to be responsive, but there's a spectrum to it. So once you are hitting that threshold of it's almost where you're killing your creativity and you're making trade-off by answering customers' email like 2 minutes after, right? So what I like to do is allocate a specific time of the day just to dedicate on customer interaction. And within that time, I only focus on being responsive to customers, providing value and providing knowledge that customers can consume from. By doing that, customers are happy because they get a good response within a 24-hour timeline. But it's also a win for me because it doesn't kill my creativity. I am focused on customers, and I can do a lot more things if I dedicate that time for customers and do other things.
So obviously you're an entrepreneur, you've been in the corporate world, you had a lot of experience, fortunate to have worked for companies like IBM and Walmart, right? And now you're having real experience building your own corporations. Yes. So you have two options. You have $1 million, or you have an opportunity to be the Warren Buffett for a week, him coaching you and training you. Which would you choose? I
would go with Warren Buffett because Warren Buffett and maybe other business leaders that I admire, like Peter Thiel, they're all investors, right? They have the capital to deploy if they think that I can do something good in business or in societies today. I think their insight and their experience and the conversation that I would be able to have with them is a lot more valuable than $1 million. They are founders who have built great businesses worth billions of dollars, and I think that's the price of that is it's priceless, right? So I would stick with Warren Buffett, maybe Peter Thiel. So you'd rather be with a coach that can give you some wisdom and tips on what you can do better. Yes. Any closing thoughts for our audience? So I think my lesson learned while running a startup after leading a huge company like Walmart and IBM is that you always have to have someone constantly challenging you. And that brings a lot of environments where I would have to acknowledge myself that I'm not the only one who will be able to make the right decisions. It really creates an opportunity for me to be humble and make sure that the decisions we're making is a well-calculated decision versus me just having to throw out something and everyone being agreeing to it. I think that creates a lot of risk, especially in the startup business, because if you want your ideas to be really sound and really well calculated, without having someone challenging that idea, you'll never know if this idea is actually something that you can work with. And I think creating that environment in your company is really important to make sure that your ideas are good enough for customers.
Well, thanks for joining me today.
Oh,
Appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, I wish you all the best with this new venture.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah.
This episode of Coffee with Closers is brought to you by One IMS, a leading digital marketing agency helping businesses win new customers. To request a free marketing ROI audit, please visit oneims.com. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. To make sure you never miss an episode, please subscribe.